the board to facilitate transparency, accountability, and understanding of the work of the district in fulfilling its mission, vision, values, and its commitments to equity and accountability. Progress updates shall be provided for the following: A. Strategic plan goals. B. Other long-term plan goals. C. Equity and accountability commitments. D. Annual plan goals. E. School improvement plan goals. This process is part of the broader work of the superintendent to ensure that the district monitors the effectiveness, outcomes, and impacts for all students from its curricula, programs, departments, initiatives, and overall work. Both the impacts of individual initiatives and programs on students and the overall experience of students should remain in focus when monitoring and considering data about particular programs. Data used for policy decisions. Trustees shall strive to make policy decisions based on information received in these reports that reflects the progress or the need for improvement toward these various goals, and with consideration of the overall best interests, with respect to advancing our mission, vision, values, and commitments to equity and accountability of each and every student in the district. Report template form. The superintendent shall develop a common report template or set of templates and/or report guidelines to be used consistently for formal progress monitoring reports created by the superintendent and district staff, and a clear process for the district to ensure that progress updates and reports to the board and community are accurate, complete, and fully comply with this and other relevant policies. The board will approve this procedure and the templates developed and any updates to those. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03L, page 1 of 15.1. Board Report Calendar Policy. GPE Board Report Schedule. In an effort to establish a balanced form of governance, the board requires process information to make good policy decisions and oversight. The board desires to follow a model of balanced governance that focuses the board's efforts on the monitoring of progress on district's goals. This shall be accomplished through the focus of board meetings on formative board reports developed and delivered to the trustees at regular board meetings by the superintendent and staff, as designated in the formative board report calendar below. Formative report calendar. 2. Formative assessment report. January-February. March-April. May June-July. Strategic Area 1. A guaranteed and viable curriculum.
That is
Process
insane.
Goal 1.1x. Strategic Area
That's
1.
not within
A
the 3 months
guaranteed
of
and
public
viable
school start.
curriculum. Process Goal
Where they're supposed to
1.2x.
rewrite their
Strategic Area
plans.
1. A guaranteed and viable
joke. That's not
curriculum.
even
Process Goal
following federal
1.3x. Strategic Area 2.
They don't
Highly
assess
effective
until after they
instructional practices.
transition
Process
money
Goal
to other
2.1x. Strategic Area
programs. I
2.
don't get it.
Highly effective instructional practices. Process Goal 2.2x. Strategic Area 2. Highly effective instructional practices. Process Goal 2.3x. Strategic Area 2. Highly effective instructional practices. Process Goal 2.4x. Strategic Area 2.
I'm
Highly
sorry.
effective instructional practices. Process Goal 2.5x. Lola Brooks, December
That's
2nd,
unacceptable.
2020. Reference 3.03L, page 2 of 15.
Page 2 of
Board
15.
report frequency and timeline. Formal reports to the board should adhere to the following timelines and
Let's
according to
understand
the
this.
dates specified in
Within
the relevant
90
planning documents.
days of
Strategic
school
plan
start,
goals. 1. Formal
plans are
progress
supposed to
monitoring
change.
report should be provided each year by December following the school year for which the data were collected. The report should assess progress on each strategic plan goal. The report will be considered a formative report in all years except the final year of the plan, when it will be considered a summative report. Other long-term plan goals. 1. Formal progress monitoring report should be provided each year by December following the
That's
school year for
unacceptable.
which
That's
the
not
data
talking
were
about how they're
collected.
using the money.
The report should assess progress on each long-term plan goal. The report will be considered a formative report in all years except the final year of the plan, when it will be considered a
This is
summative report.
unacceptable. They don't plan
These
on
long-term
changing.
plan reports should be presented together with the strategic plan reports. Annual plan goals. At least 2 formative progress monitoring reports for each Tier 1 annual plan goal should be provided from September-May. At least 1 formative progress monitoring reports for each Tier 2 annual plan program goal should be provided August-May. One formal summative progress monitoring report should be provided in June of each school year. This
Good
report
joke.
should address the final outcome and status for each annual plan goal, both Tier 1 and Tier 2 goals. Annual school-specific goals. One formal summative progress monitoring report per school should be provided each year by the end of September to assess progress on each SIP goal for the preceding school year. These reports shall be submitted to the board as written-only reports. 3 to 4 aggregated summaries of the formal written school-specific reports will be presented and discussed with the board in October, November, and possibly December of each school year. Numbers may be presented in appropriate groupings, e.g., elementary, middle, high, or based on feeder patterns,
They're
or
not
other
talking about
groupings as
disaggregated
appropriate to
by
provide
race.
the
They're not
most
talking
accurate
about
and
that. That's
productive
bullshit.
understanding of student outcomes
Use
and
my
experiences, and school experiences and needs that relate to student outcomes. And Golo Brooks, December 2nd, 2020, reference 3.03
I don't
L,
know who wrote
page 3
this.
of 15.3.
It's
Progress.
unacceptable.
The superintendent will consult with the board to determine appropriate groupings. By default, the groupings will be high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. Choice secondary schools that include grades 6 through 12 will be included in both the high school and middle school reports. The elementary school aggregation may be organized into 2 reports, each representing a subset of elementary schools or each focusing on a different subset of the goals. These summary reports will be organized around the district's annual goals and will use schools as the unit of measure, rather than individual students. Though supplemental data on students may be provided as appropriate to offer greater context for understanding the progress. Equity and accountability commitments and annual goals target measures. One formal annual progress monitoring report for districts' commitments to equity and accountability target measures must be presented by the end of June and must be in compliance with the equity and accountability policy.
What is
This
that?
report may be tied to the annual plan formal summative progress monitoring report but must include goal target measure status rating for each goal. As part of the establishment of the annual board governance calendar and in creation of relevant planning documents, the superintendent will work with the board to provide a timeline for reporting on specific annual, Tier 1 and Tier 2 goals and aggregate school-based reports, and the specific dates for each of the described progress monitoring reports.
This is a joke.
Timelines for
This is horrible.
establishing and updating strategic and annual plans and goals, as set in Policy 0150, should be followed as delays in that process may impact reporting. From time to time, the board and/or superintendent may initiate an additional report to the board, as needed, to address an emerging issue, a change in plan, or deeper tracking of something already being reported to the board. Reports posted to the community to promote focus on the district goals and commitments, and to facilitate our value of collaboration by keeping all stakeholders informed. The superintendent shall ensure that progress towards all goals and commitments is posted on the district website regularly according to the following frequency and schedule. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020, reference 3.03 L, page 4 of 15.4. Annually, within 1 week of the date for the required corresponding formal progress report for the following goals, commitments, strategic plan goals or other long-term plan goals quarterly during the school year, including 2 formative progress updates, 1 before winter break and no later than December 31st. 1 before spring break and no later than April 15th, and 1 summative progress update within 1 week of the date for the required corresponding formal summative progress report for the following goals, commitments, annual plan goals, SIP goals, equity and accountability commitments. Annual measures progress monitoring updates on goals should be accessible not only on any web page dedicated to progress reporting data, but also directly or via a link from the most relevant program, department, or school web pages associated with the goals and plans. Regular progress monitoring updates should include, at a minimum, the following elements: The goal S being addressed in the update, the target measures being used to assess the goal S, the actual current interim measure being used to evaluate progress for this update, the current status of progress to goal. See status descriptions and formal progress monitoring report content section below. Optional, but encouraged. For off-track goal not met rating, information about what caused status to be off track not met, the superintendent or designee shall provide notification to the board when regular progress monitoring updates are posted. The superintendent shall provide confirmation to the board at the first regular board meetings of the month in September, January, and May that all required progress monitoring updates have been posted. Additional reports. It is not uncommon for the district to present to the board a variety of reports that are required by state statute and/or that support transparency and accountability for district operations, but that do not directly monitor progress in the district toward strategic goals or annual plan goals. Reports of this type, e.g. field trips, construction progress or change orders, budget updates, etc., should generally be included as a consent agenda item. Occasionally, if these reports contain areas that require a formal presentation or further discussion, board directors or the superintendent can request that those reports or sections of the report be moved to the action or discussion items. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03 L, page 5 of 15.5. Portion of the board meeting. At least once in the first 2 months of the school year, the superintendent will provide the board with a demographics and enrollment report. Note that state, federal, and other legally and contractually, e.g., for grants required reports not listed under items 80 in the above list of reports should first comply with any relevant mandated reporting requirements, and should then address relevant aspects of reporting from this policy, as determined appropriate by the superintendent, in consultation with the board. The superintendent will enumerate and maintain a list of all legally required reports, and any timeline requirements. Occasionally, the board may request an additional report of the superintendent. The superintendent may also choose to issue additional reports to help provide important information to the board. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03 L, page 6 of 15.6. Policy GPF Board Reports Content Board Report Template Content. To support the board's oversight role, all superintendent or staff reports to the board, written and or oral, shall be approved by the superintendent or designee prior to submission to the board. The superintendent's approval should be noted by date on the cover page of the report or in another conspicuous location. Be submitted according to the timeline requirements specified in this policy. The superintendent shall develop a template for the board reports. The report template shall require, at a minimum, the following. Board report focus. The report should be organized around district strategic and annual goals and the corresponding pre-identified measurable outcomes. Specifically, the report should clearly identify the goal S being addressed in the report, outcome-based target measure for each goal, current actual outcome-based measure for each goal target, or, if unavailable at time of progress report, the actual outcome-based interim measure being used to evaluate whether the goal is on track during the course of the implementation, the timeline for monitoring and assessment of these particular goals, whether the goal was considered a stretch goal, i.e., a goal that is deliberately challenging or ambitious, and how these goals support the district's strategic or annual goals, the district's commitment to equity and accountability, and/or the district's advancement of its values. General report content. The report should contain the following components. 1. Ensure that the report clearly identifies the link to the district vision, strategic goals, and annual plan goals. 2. Ensure that measurable outcome criteria are included. 3. Ensure that specific data are identified that directly indicate goal progress. 4. Ensure all results reported are compared against similar districts nationally when possible. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03 L, page 7 of 15.7. 5. Ensure all results are disaggregated and reported by ethnicity and impoverished students. 6. Ensure that specific timelines are indicated for board review of goal progress. 7. Ensure that specific positions are assigned as responsible for action steps on measurable goals. 8. Ensure that problems or challenges are specific, targeted, and clearly communicated in the board meeting presentation as part of the board review and oversight. 9. Ensure that new, revised, or existing program components and procedures, or elimination of programs or program components address specific identified problems or challenges.
That's a joke.
10. Ensure and specifying a timeline for regular goal progress checking during the board meeting. 11. Ensure research citations and/or studies are included to support recommended program and process adoptions. Goal status indicators specify current status using the red, yellow, green color to unambiguously indicate progress on the goals based on the following color assignment. 8. Formative status during course of plan implementation period. Summative status at end of plan implementation period. On track. Light green. Outcomes based. Interim measures indicate progress is on track to meet goal without any significant change or new resources, and there are no known roadblocks that are likely to compromise progress. Goal met. Green. Target outcome S achieved or exceeded. At risk. Light yellow. Outcomes based. Interim measures indicate progress is not on track and/or roadblock has been identified that is expected to take progress off track, but a high confidence plan is in place to get back on track. Goal partially met. Yellow. Significant subset of target outcomes was achieved or significant measured progress was made toward target outcome S, though target S were not fully met. Off track. Outcomes based. Goal not target outcome S were low. Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03 L, page 8 of 15. 9. Light red. Interim measures indicate progress is not on track or roadblock has been identified that is expected to take progress off track, and there is not yet a high confidence plan in place to get back on track. Met. Red. Not met. Rationale for status rating. Explain how goal status ratings were determined. Focus on the target measures in comparison to current interim measures. Identify any roadblocks. For any light yellow ratings, indicate what caused the goal to be off track, what the plan is to get back on track, and what evidence and reasoning provide confidence that the plan will put the goal back on track. For any yellow ratings, indicate what caused the goal to be off track and why the progress made qualifies as significant. For any red or light red ratings, indicate what caused the goal to be off track, not met. Ensure that measures are specified at appropriate levels of aggregation and disaggregation to evaluate progress on the entire goal and to evaluate our equity and accountability commitments and targets. For any goals with risk mitigation monitoring criteria that are not green, light green, indicate what is thought to have caused the negative impact. Indicate how that negative impact will be addressed and what evidence we have that gives confidence that planned approach will correct the negative impact. Findings and reflections reflect on what we learned from the data collected, specifically outcome-based measures and outcome-based interim measures, equity risk monitoring criteria, fidelity of implementation measures, other relevant data. Qualitative or quantitative. Consider the following questions and include answers in the formal reports for those questions that provide the most insight about what is working and what is not in achieving quality outcomes for all students. What did measures reveal? Oh, how well did the measures and interim measures help drive the work at the ground level of implementation? Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020. Reference 3.03 L, page 9 of 15. Oh, how well did the measures and interim measures help drive the work at higher levels of implementation and support? Oh, was there other data that seemed more useful or useful in association with the selected measures? Oh, how did stakeholders help supplement understanding of the impacts and effectiveness of the work? What were the greatest challenges to quality outcomes and experiences encountered? Oh, what seemed to be the limiting factors to progress? Oh, what were particularly effective mitigations? Oh, which specific resources or contexts minimized or exacerbated challenges? Oh, what additional resources seemed needed to achieve outcomes? minimize inequities, and/or improve quality of the experience for stakeholders. How are strategies working? Was fidelity of strategy implementation high or low? When collecting data about this goal, were there other practices that were not necessarily planned but were being implemented that seemed to advance or detract from quality implementations or outcomes? Or are there aspects of the strategy that may be linked to equity risk monitoring criteria in positive or negative ways? Do staff, students, or families have any strong positive or negative reactions to the strategies? Were costs of implementation higher or lower than expected? Were there any positive or negative unanticipated impacts of the strategies? Should the strategy be continued? Are there any other key takeaways? Next steps: identify for the board any significant next steps that the district will be taking to address goal progress and attainment, including additional resources, changes in strategies, additional data collection, other key changes that will help the board to understand the work, the needs, impacts on students and staff, implications for policy development, and progress towards goals. If any goal presented in the report is rated as red, and the report is not a summative report covering the overall strategic or annual plans, the report must present a timeline for reporting back to the board about progress on these goals. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020, reference 3.03 L, page 10 of 1510. This report must be presented in writing and may or may not be discussed during a board meeting. See below regarding board follow-up action. Identify any of the following that you would like to recommend to and/or request of the board in support of goal progress and attainment. Note that anything presented in this section will require board approval to proceed. Potential policy revisions and timeline. Needed additional resources that are not within the district's current budget plan and that would require board approval, including timeline. Measurement adjustments to what was approved in strategic or annual plans. Timeline adjustments to what was approved in strategic or annual plans, or board reporting calendar. Goal adjustments to what was reported in strategic or annual plans. Other requests or recommendations, as appropriate. Report organization and formatting. Format reports to ensure the following. Make the language plain and understandable to non-educators. If acronyms or education-specific terms are used, they should be defined in the report, at first use where possible, and in a list of key terms and acronyms where appropriate. Label all axes, tables, graphs, figures, and data clearly. Make graphical data clear and understandable such that it cannot be misunderstood. When possible, include data in tables and reports. Clarify when comparative data are based on past year's classes versus based on cohort growth. Include the date on which the report was finalized. If the report is a subsequent version of a previously provided report, it should indicate so, and include both the date of the previous version and its own date. If the report is a follow-up to a previous report, it should indicate so, specifying both the report it is in follow-up of, and its own finalized date. Policy GPG. Lola Brooks, December 2nd, 2020, reference 3.03 L, page 11 of 1511. Board report vetting. Board report vetting protocols. Each individual board report should be prepared and submitted with sufficient time for the following report review and approval process. Step 1. District staff complete the report using the prescribed report template and submit to the superintendent or designee. Step 2. Superintendent reviews and approves the report when all report criteria are met and no superfluous information is included. Step 3. Board directors receive the report at least 8 business days prior to the board meeting. Step 4. Board directors review the report and submit related questions and requests for additional information to the board liaison at least 5 business days prior to the board meeting. Board directors may provide additional questions, feedback, and request additional information at the meeting as appropriate, but should endeavor to present the majority of their initial concerns prior to the board meeting. Step 5. The board liaison will compile similar report questions and requests into a summative document and send to the superintendent. A copy will be sent to the board president. Step 6. The superintendent and their staff shall make revisions and respond to questions when possible. If revisions are made to the report, the superintendent or designee must approve the revised report. Step 7. The revised report shall be sent to all trustees. Trustees shall indicate to the board president if they believe the report does not comply to the board report content requirements. This must be communicated at least 3 days prior to the board meeting. Step 8. The board president and officers who determine board meeting agenda items shall remove the board report if they believe the report does not comply to the board report content requirements. Policy GPH Lola Brooks December 2nd, 2020 reference 3.03 L page 12 of 1512. Board response to board reports. Board actions regarding reports to the board. For all reports submitted to the board, whether in the consent agenda in writing only, or presented in writing and discussed during the board meeting, the board must vote on whether to accept the report as fulfilling the given monitoring and reporting requirement established for that goal. Note that acceptance of the report does not indicate approval of any requests or recommendations to the board presented within the report, nor does it indicate the board's approval of the progress on the work itself. Specifically, the board should consider the following options. A. The board accepts the report as presented. B. The board accepts the report as presented and requests some additional information be provided at a future time or in a later planned report. C. The board requires additional information be presented and delays accepting the report until additional information is provided and accepted by the board. If a report is presented only in a consent agenda, and is not presented separately for further discussion, board passing of the consent agenda will imply that the board accepts any reports contained within it. Any reports explicitly removed from the consent agenda or also included on the board agenda for additional presentation discussion will not be considered accepted by the board as part of the consent agenda approval. In addition, once a report is submitted to the board, the following actions may ensue. I. Request compliance with reporting and monitoring requirements. Prior to the board meeting, if a board director finds that any of the reporting requirements are not met in a given report, that board director should inform the board president of their concerns. The board president should communicate any such concerns to the superintendent. The board president and superintendent should attempt to come to consensus on any revisions needed for the item to be included at the upcoming board meeting. If the board president or superintendent believe that adequate revisions have not been completed in a timely fashion, the report should be removed from the meeting agenda. If, at the start of a board meeting, a board director is concerned that a report does not meet the reporting requirements, during the approval of the agenda at the relevant board meeting, the board director may propose that a report be removed from the agenda for that meeting and only brought back when all reporting requirements are met. The board may then choose to remove that report from the agenda or to proceed with the report on the agenda as planned, which may or may not result in board acceptance of the report. Removed from consent agenda. If a board director would like further discussion and or a separate vote to consider acceptance of a report in the consent agenda, the board director should request to have that item removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration. Such a request may be to Lola Brooks December 2nd, 2020 reference 3.03 L page 13 of 1513. 3. Made prior to a board meeting or at the agenda approval or consent agenda portions of the board meeting. When possible, as described in section above, board directors should raise their concerns about reports to the board president prior to the relevant board meeting. Ask clarifying questions. The board may ask questions of clarification of the superintendent and or his designated staff members to better understand the content of the report, and most importantly, the impact of the work on students, staff, families, district culture, and desired outcomes. When possible, board directors should submit clarifying questions to the superintendent prior to the board meeting. Additional time during the board meeting may or may not be available for clarifying questions during that item's time on the agenda. IV. Provide feedback to the superintendent. The board may express, to the superintendent, their individual satisfactions, concerns, and/or feedback about the work in the report. All feedback provided by individual or directors may be considered by the superintendent and the staff based on its merits.
Hmm.
However, such feedback is not considered direction from the board unless otherwise explicitly indicated, formally or informally, during the discussion. Such feedback may be provided to the superintendent prior to or following the board meeting, and sometimes, time allowing, during the discussion of that agenda item during the board meeting. V. Request additional information. The board may request additional data or information from the superintendent to be in compliance with reporting requirements, to provide greater clarity and/or transparency, to help inform related board decisions, and/or to support the role of the board. Such requests should be made in consultation with the superintendent and should not unreasonably detract from the execution of the work to support students. The superintendent should make clear to the board the implications of their request if such requests will require significant time, effort, or expense to the district so that the board can prioritize its requests accordingly. When possible, such requests should be made of the superintendent by board directors prior to board meeting. Additional time during the board meeting may or may not be available for clarifying questions during that item's time on the agenda. Vi. Discuss open issues with board directors and superintendent. Time allowing, if board directors have concerns related to accepting a report or related to next steps from a report, board members may discuss further with each other and with the superintendent, in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Primarily, such discussions will take place during board meetings in open public session as appropriate. VA. Establish a follow-up timeline. If the board does not accept a particular report, or if the progress rating for any goal in a report, except the final summary reports for the annual or strategic goals, was already, the board, or the board president on behalf of the board, should consult with Superintendent Lola Brooks December 2nd, 2020 reference 3.03 L page 14 of 1514. Determine a timeline for an updated report. They should also agree on whether the follow-up report will be written only and included in consent agenda or will be written and will be discussed during a future board meeting. The board should also establish a follow-up timeline with the superintendent for receiving any additional follow-up data or information. Generally, such timelines will be discussed and determined during board meetings. However, when the board president and superintendent are aware of follow-up needs prior to the board meeting, they should consult with each other to agree on a timeline to propose at the board meeting. Additional reporting requirements. In addition to the reporting above, the district will ensure that formal progress monitoring reports shared with the board are made available on the district website in a way that community members may reasonably locate and access. Report annually in a news release to the local media the district's progress toward meeting strategic and annual goals. Lola Brooks December 2nd, 2020 reference 3.03 L page 15 of 1515.
Well, I guess that's it. Well, now I'm going to locate the California, you know, process for participating, the board's participation. I'll see if I can find something better because quite frankly, this is limited and it doesn't create access to all children. So you decide and then you share your concerns.